I don't think it's a hot take to say that next to Buffy herself, Willow has maybe one of, if not the best arc in the series. And not just because of where she starts versus where she ends up, but the entire journey in between. Season 7 of Buffy is a bit of a letdown for a few reasons, and one of the main ones is how Willow's arc is wrapped up. It takes the storyline that had been building since the start, Willow's relationship with magic and her identity, and it just sort of fizzles out. And it's such a letdown because it had the potential to be incredible. You don't get to shoehorn in half-assed fake deep imagery after spending zero time unpacking the reasons for Willow's problems and instead go for vague addiction language soup. Anyway, I'm not here to talk about what Season 7 did wrong, I am here to talk about what Season 6 actually did really well. The magic addiction arc is good. Sometimes. Let's get this out of the way. I don't mean this.
Well, if you hadn't gotten so much of this in your system in the first place. And he knows spells that last for days, and the burnout factor is like nothing.
Who's your supplier?
But beyond some clunky dialogue and imagery, the magic addiction storyline is both the natural trajectory of Willow's arc and strengthens the themes of the show. This arc may be controversial, but you know what isn't controversial? Paying a reasonable phone bill. Which, thanks to the partner of today's video, Mint Mobile, is easier than ever. How often have you gotten your phone bill, looked at that number, and done some quick math to realize that's too much money? What are you actually paying for? Unlimited talk and text? Mobile hotspots? You can get all these features with Mint Mobile for as low as $15 per month on the nation's largest 5G network. And how do they keep costs this low, you may ask? Well, because they sell directly to you online. They cut out the middlemen, all the retail stores and salespeople. So why should you pay more than you have to for access to the same network? And switching doesn't have to be intimidating at all. Switching to Mint takes only 15 minutes, and thanks to digital eSIM cards, you can sign up and activate immediately on your own phone from the comfort of your home. If you're interested in making the swap, check out my link, also linked in my description, to get premium wireless for only $15 a month.
Channeling such potent magic through yourself, it could open a door that you may not be able to close.
The most common complaints about this arc have to do with the changing metaphor feeling jarring, which in some ways is fair. At the same time, Buffy magic is, and has always been, a bit wibbly-wobbly. From possession to alternate universes to seeming omnipotence.
I'll just shift everyone who isn't a 15-year-old girl into an alternate dimension.
What?
Because it's usually serving some psychological or philosophical purpose. This is why magic is used to represent love and connection, and then later represents power and control. Magic is self-expression, which is why it can be as beautiful or as toxic as the person casting it. And Willow's magic use is especially tethered to her emotional expression. In Season 4, it's both a symbol for her and Tara's bond, and a way for them to overcome censors for their relationship. When magic goes wrong for her, even before Season 6, it's when she's doing it alone and using it as a poor coping tool. By contrast, when she's practicing with Tara, it's creative and collaborative.
It's all about emotional control.
Like water. It takes the shape of whatever emotional container it's in. But the fact that magic enables both connection and destruction doesn't make it inconsistent. Not necessarily. It's like saying, well, in this scene, drinking brought people together and made them laugh together. But in this scene, it makes them angry and volatile and creates conflict. So which is it?
Beer bad. Bad beer.
This isn't a perfect analogy, but you get my meaning. Magic is always serving multiple purposes. So, while the Season 6 magic metaphor at its worst is unsubtle and preachy, there are some wonderful ideas here that both deepen our understanding of Willow as a character and deepen the themes of the show.
And he knows spells that last for days, and the burnout factor is like nothing.
But this isn't all great. The magic metaphor is least successful when it tries to draw a one-to-one comparison to substance abuse and focuses less on Willow's actual behavior. This is where we get the ham-fisted imagery and dialogue, and where any kind of message just falls flat. There's absolutely no nuance.
They're working the dark magics and got addicted. I've never met anyone with enough strength to quit before.
Magic is portrayed unambiguously as a substance addiction with all the subtlety of beer bad. It's also a jumbled mess of symptoms. The show picks from a grab bag of high or hallucinogenic experiences without rhyme or reason. Rack is a dealer, Amy needs her fix. This is the stuff that feels out of left field. Because Willow was abusing magic even earlier in the season, but it wasn't this. The problem here is using imagery, language, and plot beats that are specific to drug abuse, which leaves the story feeling preachy and hollow. If I really wanted to, I could rationalize it and excuse it by saying that this is consistent with magic as an escape. We might say, well, Willow's dependency is normally on the power that magic gives her to control her life, but ingesting it here, she almost becomes chemically influenced by experiencing the raw power itself as a high. Still, being able to do mental gymnastics to rationalize this doesn't make it successful. But the key reason that this arc is so inconsistent and frustrating is that really, we're talking about two metaphors competing here. One for drugs and one for addiction. And to some degree, some of these beats make sense. If they were trying to talk about addiction, drugs are easy, recognizable shorthand for addiction. And between that and some early aughts after-school special leanings, a lot of the nuance gets lost in the sauce.
I was just a flyer.
And it's when we look at the metaphor for addiction itself that the ideas become a lot clearer and a lot more interesting. Specifically, when we look at this as a behavioral addiction.
When things get rough, you don't even consider the options. You just do a spell.
Behavioral addiction is something that we can both intuitively understand, and that's also backed up by research. We don't only become dependent on chemical compounds that we ingest, but to our own behaviors and the reactions that they produce. There are tons of studies on this. Behavioral science experts believe that all entities capable of stimulating a person can be addictive, and whenever a habit changes into an obligation, it can be considered an addiction. The individual is not addicted to a substance, but the behavior or the feeling brought about by the relevant action. And this has been done in other shows. Crazy Ex-Girlfriend and Fleabag in particular are two great examples of stories about people with patterns of behavioral addiction. Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, I think, did this especially well. Rebecca, the main character, is addicted to the high of new relationships and to the fantasy of a person, and she chases people in search of that feeling.
I'm happy, but it's not real. It's a high.
Even when it's clearly painful and self-destructive. So, while Willow here is using an external source, what she's really dependent on is what magic allows her to do and to be. The story is least interesting when it's about what the magic is doing to her, and most interesting when it's about what she is doing with it. So magic as a literal substance addiction both feels narratively unsupported and thematically weak. But Willow becoming dependent on using magic, in general, makes complete sense.
Tell me, is it dangerous? Oh no. Well, could we pretend it is?
If you could be the plain old Willow or Super Willow, who would you be?
For Willow, her use and then abuse of magic is tied directly to her needs, wants, and insecurities, which have been shown consistently to us from episode 1. Magic is so dangerous to Willow because it has this two-pronged function. It expresses and it suppresses. It expresses her power, her competency, her need to prove herself, and at the same time, it allows her to suppress her anxieties and her discomfort. The longer Willow practices magic, the more it becomes a defining part of her identity. And a strong identity is something that we see she struggled with for a very long time. Willow's ability to take up space has been routinely policed by others. A controlling mother, the tiny boxes of high school politics, and kept in line by bullying peers.
Excuse me? Who gave you permission to exist?
To practice magic and to be really, really good at it is to give herself a fresh rebranding, complete with confidence, competence, and even a new wardrobe. At the same time, there's this fragility to it. She still fears that no matter how much she changes, someone will discover her as the meek, uncool loser that she was in high school. So we can see that holding tight to magic and who it allows her to be is something she's very concerned with. And we see this in season 6. What's the first thing that Amy says that actually convinces Willow to go out with her and abuse magic?
Maybe you'd rather sit home all night, alone, like in high school.
No. That's what gets her to agree to go out with her against any better instincts. And so much of Willow's evolving identity is tied to the idea of performance. Becoming a competent witch helps Willow project a very curated, idealized image of herself.
Your costume is perfect. Nobody's gonna know the truth, about you.
Costume?
You're already in character.
One of the first iconic insults that Cordy makes towards her is about her appearance.
Nice dress. Good to know you've seen the softer side of Sears.
Oh, well, my mom picked it out.
It's not just that she's a nerd, it's that someone else has dressed her. Think about the implications of that. So for Willow, her appearance, her identity, and her confidence with magic become deeply entwined.
Take it off.
No, I need it.
And we can even see this with Dark Willow. Even grief-stricken, there's a layer of performance here. Black hair, dark clothes, the corny, maniacal villain lines. I've seen the dialogue here and Allison's performance get criticized as too hammy or cartoonishly evil, but I think that's kind of the point. If we read Willow as purposely putting on a front. So much of Willow has been costumes. This is just her latest and most intense. Magic also makes her valuable. We already know that Willow has a shaky self-worth and a hefty fear of abandonment. Magic, of course, isn't the reason for Buffy's friendship, but it's enough that Willow believes it's a central part of her value to the team, and associates her competency with magic with her place in it. From Willow's first spell through most of Season 5, most of Willow's magic use is done to help the team. Which makes sense from a purely pragmatic point of view, but we can also see how being the group's resident problem solver would impact her self-worth. And it's really interesting, because while this is a source of pride for Willow, it's also something that, to a degree, she resents.
Well, maybe I don't want to be reliable all the time.
She's caught in this scenario in which she doesn't want to be the big gun, or last hope, or reliable, but nonetheless expects this as her role. And she does want to help, and she does care what her friends think of her. She's at war with herself, at once wants to be Super Willow, and at the same time is so scared to let others down.
You're my big gun.
No, I was never a gun. Someone else should be the gun. I could be a cudgel, or a pointy stick.
Because what if she messes up? What if she proves to others, to herself, that she really is a big joke, and has been all along? So being good at magic isn't just about proving herself, it's about, she thinks, the safety in her relationships. And magic is specifically tied to two of Willow's most significant relationships, Tara and Buffy. As she becomes more powerful, Willow's usefulness to the team in a pinch becomes a key part of her role. And as early as Season 3, we see that Willow literally believes that were Buffy to outgrow Willow's help, their friendship might be at risk.
She's hardly even human anymore. How can I be her friend now? She doesn't need me.
And magic is just as, if not even more, central to her relationship with Tara. It's the first thing that drew Tara to her, and she thinks the basis of their connection. And to a degree, we can see why she thinks this. She and Tara only met when Willow was already well established in magic. At Wicca Group, they were the only real witches. Magic was the thing that brought them together in a crisis, and it's the first thing that Tara expresses admiration for.
She had a lot of power. Like you. I'm definitely nothing special. No, you are.
Even with Tara's insistence that she stop, it makes perfect sense why Willow would be so unwilling and even unable to give that up. And all of this is summed up in its simplest form in Wrecked, which is comedically an episode that has both the worst and best parts of this arc.
You don't need magic to be special.
Don't I? I mean, Buffy, who was I? Just some girl. Tara didn't even know that girl.
It's also noteworthy, I think, that it's specifically both Tara and Buffy who Willow tries to mind wipe to preserve her own comfort. These are two people that her magic use, confidence, and identity is deeply tied to, and neither of which, at this point, are giving her positive validation. Tara, who's actively critical of her behavior, and Buffy, who is tormented by the reality that Willow has foisted on her. If it were playing Fortnite that got her validation from Buffy and connection from Tara, Willow would be stacking victory royales day and night. So these are the things that magic allows her to express, and at the same time, magic allows her to avoid things that she finds uncomfortable.
Well, isn't there some way I can just make it go away? Just because I say so? Can't I just make it go poof?
Willow is extremely preoccupied with how other people see her. Anytime her status with others might be in jeopardy, it spins her out, and magic gives her an easy route to fix it. She doesn't even see the irony in doing a memory spell on Tara. That's how deep this goes. Willow does hit bottom multiple other times this season, but to me, this is truly the most heinous thing she could do. By holding on so tightly to the thing she thinks earned her love, she actually loses it. Willow has a really low tolerance for distress, especially interpersonal distress. And we can see that magic allows her to indulge this impulse that if she doesn't like something, she should just make it go away. And we can see how deep this distress avoidant logic goes in the way that she applies it to, as for example, Dawn, who she openly identifies with.
I can't help it. I just have all this involuntary empathy for Dawn. Because she's, a big spaz.
And so she applies the same logic that she does to herself. If Dawn doesn't want to suffer, why should she? Magic is consistently the thing that can save her from having to do the hard thing, having the hard conversation, feeling the hard feelings.
You have to go through the pain. Well, isn't there some way I can just make it go away? Just because I say so? Can't I just make it go poof?
So how does this lead to the full-blown addiction we see in Season 6? Well, at the end of Season 5, Willow has become powerful enough that she's already acting in Buffy's stead. When she gets revenge on Glory, we get this eerily prescient scene. Willow goes toe-to-toe with the season's big bad on her own. She exchanges the battle taunts. She does more damage than even Buffy can. Then, this is something that Buffy and the team count on even more as the season ends. When Buffy's catatonic, Willow's power is what holds them together and brings her back. At this point, she's not just using more magic for shits, but because it's literally keeping them alive. But then, despite everything, Buffy dies anyway. And Buffy's death and resurrection are what pave the way for everything to come. We've now got this triple whammy. Willow, who in all her big gun power has failed, and in her mind let Buffy die. She's also more powerful than ever, with something to prove. And on top of that, she just misses her friend. And now she has the power to make all of this right. And she has these beautiful contradictions in her behavior that betray the chaos inside her. She's at once deeply arrogant and deeply insecure. When things go right, she's the first to take credit, and when they're wrong, she starts to cower, or worse, guilt others to weasel out of it.
Maybe the fates sent down all that destruction on us to stop us.
You mean, maybe it was my fault.
As soon as she might be responsible for something bad, something that might be a problem for everyone, she deflects blame. Suddenly, it's not Willow's great accomplishment, it's we.
You did this. What did you do?
A spell. We did a spell.
Because if Buffy isn't happy, if she did the wrong thing, then her magic competence, this thing that makes her special, needs to be questioned.
But I know a spell that will make her forget she was ever in heaven.
God, what is wrong with you?
So it makes sense that this is the context around which Willow's magic use really starts to spiral into something worse. Suddenly everything is wrong. She's failed Buffy and then failed her again trying to fix it. Her fixer role isn't making sense anymore. Buffy's back and isn't thanking her. She's distant and depressed. Tara's confronting her in ways she never expected. Giles is angry at her and questioning her very character. This is all very destabilizing in general, but especially for Willow. Willow's biggest concern, the way that she's perceived by other people, is out of her control.
I just want to help people.
Maybe that's how it started, but you're helping yourself now, fixing things to your liking, including me.
And that's the theme in all of Willow's use and abuse of magic: control. And there's a delicate distinction here between power and control. Not power as in megalomaniac, but control as in neurotic, insecure nerd who was bullied
Up until college.
In what are some clearly formative experiences, Willow lived at the whims of others. But through magic, she has greater control over her circumstances. If she doesn't want to suffer or struggle, she thinks, why should she? Just make it different if you can. And at a certain point, this starts to include other people, and it becomes toxic and abusive.
Tara, I didn't mean to.
To what? Violate my mind like that?
But Willow isn't thinking of anything but her own immediate feelings. All she knows is that she wants uncomfortable things to go away, and she can make them go away.
I just wanted us not to fight anymore. You don't use magic to make a fight disappear.
So here's where that leaves us. High psychological rewards for using magic, and high emotional risk for living without it. So, all these feelings that magic creates for Willow, feelings of comfort, feelings of safety, feelings of power, feelings of value, are feelings that, especially for someone like Willow, who already craved them to begin with, can become just as addictive as anything else. So, we really get the most out of this story when we focus on the behavioral elements of magic. Because there's something really worthwhile in acknowledging the addictive potential of all sorts of things that don't involve external substances, that involve many of the same psychological and neurological processes. I think it's a really neat conversation to have.
You know, maybe I can handle it. I'll know when I've reached my limit.
Wine coolers?
Magic.
Ooh.
But not only does using an addiction lens have value in understanding Willow's character, it also connects us to the Buffyverse's longest-running metaphor.
I see now where the path of vice leads. Because she messed up everything she touched. I don't ever want to be like that.
At a certain point, Willow can't live without magic because she's gotten used to experiencing life a certain way, powerful, avoiding consequences, and indulging her immediate desires. If that sounds familiar, that's because it is. This is how vampires live. Vampires, especially Buffyverse vampires, are often characterized as id monsters who only act out of regard for what they immediately want. Vampires have also been used to explore the ideas of the subconscious and addiction. Angel the series leans heavily into this metaphor. Angel himself is compared to a recovering alcoholic, as he not only stays away from human blood, but is in recovery from being a soulless vampire. And the comparison between vampirism and addiction exists outside of the Buffyverse too. So a similar thing is happening with Willow, just with a different metaphor. So in season 6, Willow metaphorically becomes something like a vampire, giving in to her immediate wants rather than meaningful choice.
Want? Take. Have.
Very literally, if Willow wants something, she can have it. And we can see a lot of this connection in the similarities between Addict Willow, Dark Willow, and Vampire Willow.
Bored now.
Bored now.
In fact, Doppelgangland is a great microcosm of this idea that connects Willow's vampirism and magic use. The episode starts with Willow dissatisfied with being a reliable doormat, but at the mention of magic, specifically dark magic, she perks up. Then later in the episode, she pretends to be Vamp Willow and gets a taste of the status, the confidence, and the influence that she never had. And when she does, she dissociates from herself in a way that's very similar to Dark Willow. Both of them talk in third person.
Let me tell you something about Willow. She's a loser. And she always has been. She's so weak and accommodating. She's always letting people walk all over her.
Of course, there are some contextual differences. She's doing it here to keep up her ruse, and Dark Willow is distancing herself from grief. But they're still serving a similar function in showing Willow relate to herself. Both of them ridicule Willow for her meek, doormat qualities, qualities that her magic use or vampirism give her a way out of. And vampires and the concept of addiction are innately deeply tied, because both, especially in the Buffyverse, are expressions of the subconscious. So both vampirism and unchecked magic use are basically things that give Willow's subconscious a megaphone. This tracks with the third-person speech, too, as though it's literally her subconscious talking.
Let me tell you something about Willow.
In Midnight Mass, where they also liken vampirism and addiction, they bring up the addictive voice recognition technique, which is used in Rational Recovery, which is a secular alternative to AA. This excerpt pretty accurately describes what we see going on with Willow. The addiction voice is very demanding and manipulative, and thinks in the short term very much like a child. I want what I want, when I want it, and I want it now. It speaks from a more primitive part of the brain that desires to only repeat behaviors that provide immediate pleasure regardless of the long term. And this isn't to say that because we can qualify some of this as a behavioral addiction, which takes place in the subconscious, that boo-hoo, Willow didn't know what she was doing. she did. But that part of her wasn't the one in the driver's seat. Despite my appreciation for parts of the addiction arc and the way they help illuminate some things about Willow, there are absolutely a few big misses. The biggest of which is that the arc is cut short by the events of Seeing Red. They were meant to push Willow into a murderous rage, but to me, the result undercuts what's actually a fascinating and necessary conversation between her and Tara, one of the primary victims of her shitty behavior. These are two people who certainly love each other, but also have some very real issues to talk about that never get addressed. Imagine if they'd gotten to sit down post-reconciliation and unpack what actually happened between them, challenge Willow on her behavior and where it came from. Of course, that's not where it went. Tara was fridged for shock value, and Willow's story shifted from what does she make of her dysfunctional need for control to can she be redeemed for murdering Warren? Both which are interesting and worth answering, for sure, but the former, the deeply embedded character arc, kind of gets scrapped because of the flashiness of murder redemption. The text skirts around Willow's root issue rather than addressing it. But what if Tara had lived, somehow? Alive but unconscious, and Willow had gone off the rails anyways. Let's just say it works. What if Tara had brought her back from the brink, and Season 7 was their arc of addressing what actually happened in Season 6, why it was toxic, and try to build something better from there? Personally, I would have been seated. Is the magic addiction arc perfect? No. Do I think magic is always used to the fullest potential for the story? No. Is Season 6 flawless? Absolutely not. But the writing here isn't brain dead, and this arc isn't a complete waste of our time by a long shot. We don't have to write all of it off. The magic metaphor did evolve, but it evolved with Willow. Magic was always tied to Willow's self-image and self-worth. Season 6 is just when it became the most unhealthy. I think there was definitely a better way to approach this arc, even still talking about addiction, without any allusions to substance abuse. And it would have made the shift, I think, feel a lot more natural. But, we got what we got.
I'm so juiced.
Still, when we focus on Willow's behaviors and the addictive nature of magic that enables the worst of them, we can hone in on what this is really about. Willow is dependent on magic because she's running from herself. And so, a big part of her arc is returning to herself.
I want to be Willow.
And part of this means accepting love from others without condition. Love that doesn't have to be coerced or manipulated or earned. Willow has always seemed to fear that there was something fundamentally ugly and broken about her, that people would see it and be disgusted. Her dependence on magic was a band-aid for this.
If I had any real power, I could have made Oz stay with me.
Magic that made her the competent, cool person that in her mind was more deserving of respect. So the culmination of Season 6 is perfect. The fact that it's Xander, her oldest friend's declaration of absolute, unconditional love that pulls her out of a grief and magic spiral.
You're Willow.
Don't call me that.
It's perfect. And it's one of the best moments in the whole show. So, like many things in Buffy, this arc is very much a mixed bag. I don't think the text is ever suggesting that magic itself is bad the way we'd have to understand if magic just equaled hard drugs. It's not innately one thing.
Because social phenomena don't have unproblematic objective existences. They have to be interpreted and given meanings by those who encounter them.
Magic is a tool, and in the Buffyverse, a very soft, malleable tool. But that can still work to the story's advantage. Tara's been doing magic her whole life with no issues because, for the most part, she isn't using magic to compensate for her own insecurities. And there are certainly benefits to both soft and hard magic systems, and to a point, it's just a matter of preference. But in Buffy, a show that's so heavily focused on character, theme, and metaphor, I think a soft magic system suits it. And it gives us a lot to think about and reflect on. It's weird, it's brilliant, it's ambitious, it's corny, it sucks, but there's always something to find. This is kind of what I love most about the show. If nothing else, even the weirdest parts of Buffy often deserve a closer look. Thank you so much for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you also want to further support the channel and get some fun bonuses too, check out my Patreon at patreon.com/5x5takes. See you next time.